What would you do if a teacher locked away the one device keeping your child alive during class? I never thought I would be the kind of mother who had to fight a school system, but here I am, sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at a stack of medical reports and legal documents that have become my new normal. My name is Sophia Martinez, and this is the story of how a single math teacher nearly killed my daughter and changed everything I thought I knew about trust, advocacy, and the failures of our education system. Let me take you back to the beginning, before everything fell apart. My daughter Lily had just turned 13 when this all happened, right at the start of 8th grade. She had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 7 years old, and by the time she hit middle school, we had the whole routine down to a science. Her insulin pump was her lifeline, a small device about the size of a pager that attached to her body and delivered insulin throughout the day. The pump beeped occasionally, tiny little sounds that reminded us it was working, keeping my baby alive. We had done everything right, I mean everything. Before Lily started at Roosevelt Middle School, I met with the principal, the school nurse, and every single one of her teachers. We created what they called a 504 plan, a legal document that outlined all of Lily's medical needs and the accommodations the school had to provide. The nurse, Patricia Coleman, was wonderful, warm, and competent, with 20 years of experience. She knew exactly how to handle Lily's condition and even kept emergency supplies in her office. I trusted them. God, I really trusted them. Lily was thriving that fall. She had joined the school's environmental club, made a tight group of friends, and was even talking about trying out for the spring musical. Her diabetes was well controlled, her hemoglobin A1C levels were perfect, and she had become so independent with her pump management that I sometimes forgot how serious her condition really was. That was my first mistake, forgetting that not everyone understood what was at stake. The problem started in late September, about 3 weeks into the school year. Lily came home one afternoon and mentioned that her math teacher, Mr. Edward Thompson, had given her a weird look when her pump beeped during a quiz. She said he paused mid-sentence, stared at her, and then continued teaching without saying anything. I brushed it off, told myself he was probably just surprised by the sound, that surely he remembered her 504 plan. The next week, Lily told me Mr. Thompson had made a comment. They were working on algebraic equations, and her pump beeped twice in quick succession because her blood sugar was running a little high and needed a correction dose. Mr. Thompson stopped teaching, turned to the class, and said something about how electronic devices were destroying students' ability to focus. Then he looked directly at Lily and added that everyone needed to silence their electronics before entering his classroom. I felt a little flutter of concern, but Lily said she had raised her hand and explained it was her insulin pump, that it was medical equipment. According to her, Mr. Thompson just nodded and moved on. I made a mental note to email him, just to make sure we were all on the same page, but I got busy with work. I was managing a dental office and we were short-staffed that month, and I never sent that email. That was my second mistake. By early October, Mr. Thompson had become fixated on the pump. Lily reported that he commented on it almost daily, always phrasing his remarks as general statements about classroom distractions but making it obvious he was talking about her. He would say things like, "I expect absolute silence during tests, no electronic beeps, no buzzing, no exceptions." Or, "In my classroom, we focus on mathematics, not on devices." I finally sent him an email on October 10th, a polite, professional message reminding him about Lily's 504 plan and explaining that the insulin pump was not optional, that it was literally keeping her alive. I explained that the beeping was rare and that Lily had no control over it, that it was the pump's way of communicating important medical information. I asked him to please be understanding and offered to set up a meeting if he had questions. He responded 2 days later with the shortest email I have ever received. It said, "Received, Mr. Thompson." That was it. No acknowledgement of the medical issue, no reassurance, nothing. I showed it to my husband Miguel, and he said maybe that was just Thompson's style, that some teachers were more formal. I wanted to believe that, so I did. The incident happened on October 18th, a Thursday I will remember for the rest of my life. Lily had been feeling a little off that morning, not sick exactly, just tired and a bit irritable. I checked her blood sugar before school and it was slightly elevated at 160, not dangerous but higher than we liked. I made sure her pump was working correctly, packed extra supplies in her bag, and sent her off with a kiss and a reminder to check in with Nurse Coleman if she felt worse. I was at work when my phone rang at 11:15. It was Lily, and I could immediately hear in her voice that something was wrong. "Mom," she said, and her voice was shaky, "Mr. Thompson took my pump." "What do you mean he took your pump?" I asked, already standing up from my desk, grabbing my keys. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Lily explained, speaking quickly, her words tumbling over each other. They had been taking a test, a big unit exam on quadratic equations. About 20 minutes into the test, her pump beat 3 times, which meant her blood sugar was climbing and she needed to pay attention. Lily glanced down at the pump display to check the reading, just a quick look, and that was when Mr. Thompson appeared at her desk. He told her to hand over the device, Lily said. She tried to explain it was her insulin pump, that she needed it, that it was medical equipment, but he cut her off. He said, "I warned the class multiple times about electronic devices during tests, no exceptions." He said she could have it back after school. After school. 5.5 hours away. I told Lily to go directly to the nurse's office, right that second, and I would meet her at school. Then I hung up and ran to my car, driving probably faster than I should have, my mind racing through everything that could go wrong. Without her pump, Lily's blood sugar would continue to rise unchecked. She would start to feel sick, confused, weak. If it went high enough for long enough, she could develop diabetic ketoacidosis, a life-threatening condition that could put her in a coma. When I got to Roosevelt Middle School, I went straight to the nurse's office. Lily was there, pale and scared, and Nurse Coleman was with her, looking furious in a way I had never seen her look before. Patricia had already checked Lily's blood sugar manually, using a fingerstick, and it was at 240 and climbing fast. She had given Lily an injection of insulin from the emergency supplies, but without the pump's steady delivery system, managing her blood sugar was going to be much harder. "Where's the pump?" I demanded. Nurse Coleman's face was tight with anger. "Mr. Thompson has it locked in his desk drawer. I have already called the principal, but Mrs. Kennedy is in a district meeting downtown and will not be back until after lunch." I went to Mr. Thompson's classroom myself, but he refused to give me the pump. He said it was his classroom policy and that he would return it at the end of the school day as promised. I felt something crack inside me, some fundamental belief I had held about the world. I had trusted these people with my daughter's life, and one of them had decided that his classroom rules were more important than her survival. I marched down to Mr. Thompson's classroom, Lily and Nurse Coleman following behind me. The period had just ended and students were filing out, chattering and laughing, completely unaware of what had just happened. Mr. Thompson was at his desk, organizing papers, and he looked up when I walked in. "Mr. Thompson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I am Lily Martinez's mother. I need you to return her insulin pump immediately." He stood up, and I got my first real look at him. He was probably in his mid-40s, thin and severe-looking, with graying hair and a rigid posture. He looked at me like I was a student who had interrupted his class. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, and his voice was clipped and formal, "I understand your concern, but I have a classroom policy about electronic devices. All students were warned multiple times about the consequences of having devices out during tests." "That is not an electronic device," I said, and my voice was rising despite my efforts to control it. "That is medical equipment. My daughter has type 1 diabetes. That pump is keeping her alive. You have no right to take it." He crossed his arms. "All students are expected to follow the same rules, Mrs. Martinez. There can be no exceptions based on personal circumstances, or we create an unfair testing environment. Lily will receive her device at the end of the day." "Personal circumstances," I repeated, and I felt my hands starting to shake. "My daughter's diabetes is not a personal circumstance, Mr. Thompson. It is a life-threatening medical condition, and what you have done is incredibly dangerous and possibly illegal. Now give me your pump or I will call the police." His expression did not change. "That will not be necessary. The pump is secure and will be returned according to my stated policy." Nurse Coleman stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, as the school nurse, I am formally requesting that you return this medical equipment immediately. Lily's blood sugar is already dangerously high and continuing to rise." He shook his head. I appreciate your input, Nurse Coleman, but this is a matter of classroom management and academic integrity. I will discuss it with Principal Kennedy when she returns, but my decision stands. I could not believe what I was hearing. This man was willing to let my daughter's health deteriorate, potentially to the point of hospitalization or worse, because of his classroom policy. I looked at Lily, who was leaning against the doorframe, looking increasingly unwell, and I made a decision. If you do not give me that pump in the next 30 seconds, I said, my voice deadly calm now, I will call 911 and report that you are withholding life-saving medical equipment from a minor. I will also call my lawyer and the school board, and you will spend the rest of your career answering for what you have done today. Something flickered in his eyes then, maybe recognition that this was not going away, that I was not going to back down. He turned to his desk, pulled out a key ring, and unlocked the bottom drawer. He took out Lily's insulin pump and placed it on the desk. Here, he said. But I want it noted that I object to this special treatment. All students should be held to the same standard. I grabbed the pump and immediately helped Lily reattach it to her infusion site. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage the clips. Nurse Coleman was checking Lily's blood sugar again, calling out instructions, helping us stabilize the situation. We spent the next hour in the nurse's office, getting Lily's blood sugar back under control. I called Miguel and told him what had happened, and I could hear the rage in his voice even over the phone. I also called our endocrinologist, Dr. Harrison Shaw, who was appalled and insisted we bring Lily in for a check that afternoon. When Principal Kennedy finally returned from her meeting around 1:30, Nurse Coleman immediately brought her up to speed. Mrs. Kennedy, whose first name was Caroline and who had always seemed like a reasonable, caring administrator, listened to the whole story with a progressively more concerned expression. When we finished, she sat back in her chair and said, I am so sorry this happened. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I will be speaking with Mr. Thompson immediately. I felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone in authority was taking this seriously. But then Mrs. Kennedy continued, and my hope started to crumble. However, I do want to note that no permanent harm was done. Lily is okay, her blood sugar is coming back down, and she has her pump back. I think we can resolve this with a conversation and some additional training from Mr. Thompson on medical accommodations. No permanent harm, I repeated slowly. Mrs. Kennedy, my daughter's blood sugar was over 240. She could have gone into diabetic ketoacidosis. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand that this could have killed her? Mrs. Kennedy held up her hands. I absolutely understand the seriousness, Mrs. Martinez. But from a practical standpoint, we need to consider that Mr. Thompson is a veteran teacher with 18 years of experience. He made an error in judgment, but I do not believe it was malicious. He was trying to enforce his classroom rules fairly. An error in judgment, I said, and I felt my voice going cold. He was explicitly told about Lily's medical needs. He received her 504 plan. He got my email explaining the insulin pump. And when Lily told him during the test that it was medical equipment, he took it anyway. That is not an error in judgment, that is deliberate disregard for a child's safety. Mrs. Kennedy looked uncomfortable. I will be addressing this with Mr. Thompson, I assure you. But I also need to maintain a certain level of, she paused, searching for words, discretion in how I handle personnel issues. I cannot simply suspend or terminate a teacher without going through proper procedures, especially when the situation was resolved and no lasting harm occurred. I stared at her, understanding with sudden, awful clarity that she was more worried about potential legal action from Mr. Thompson than she was about what had happened to my daughter. She was already in damage control mode, trying to minimize the incident, sweep it under the rug, protect the school district. I took Lily home that afternoon and we went straight to Dr. Shaw's office. He examined her thoroughly, running blood work and checking for any signs of ketoacidosis. Thankfully, we had caught it in time, but Dr. Shaw was livid when he heard what had happened. He documented everything meticulously and told me I should file a formal complaint. That night, around 8:30, Lily started feeling sick. She was nauseous and dizzy, complaining of a headache and stomach pain. I checked her blood sugar and my heart dropped. It was 370, dangerously high despite the pump working normally now. Miguel and I looked at each other, both of us knowing what we had to do. We took her to the emergency room. The ER doctors told us that Lily was in the early stages of diabetic ketoacidosis, likely triggered by the extended period earlier that day when her blood sugar had been uncontrolled. They admitted her and started 4 fluids and insulin, monitoring her closely throughout the night. Miguel and I sat by her bed, watching the machines beep and hum, watching our daughter lie there pale and weak, and I felt a rage building in me that I had never experienced before. This was not supposed to happen. We had done everything right. We had followed every protocol, communicated with the school, set up the proper accommodations. And still, one man's stubbornness and arrogance had put my daughter in the hospital. Lily was released the next afternoon, tired and shaken but medically stable. The hospital bill, even with our insurance, was going to be over $3,000. Miguel had already missed a day of work, I had missed a day, and Lily had been traumatized by the whole experience. On Monday morning, I called the school and requested a meeting with Principal Kennedy. I also called a lawyer, Amelia Foster, who specialized in education law and disability discrimination. Amelia listened to my story and immediately said we had a strong case. The meeting with Mrs. Kennedy was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. I brought Miguel with me, and Amelia joined us by phone. Mrs. Kennedy had Mr. Thompson there too, and the tension in the room was immediate and palpable. Mr. Thompson, I noticed, looked completely unrepentant. He sat with his arms crossed, his expression stony, and when Mrs. Kennedy asked him to explain his side of the story, he launched into a defense of his actions that made me want to scream. He said he had clear classroom policies about electronic devices, that he had explained these policies multiple times, that he treated all students equally without exception. He said he had not realized the insulin pump was medical equipment, despite the 504 plan, despite my email, despite Lily telling him directly. He claimed he thought she was using it as an excuse to cheat on the test. An excuse to cheat, I said, my voice shaking. My daughter has a documented medical condition. How exactly would an insulin pump help her cheat on a math test? Mr. Thompson shrugged. Students today are very clever with technology. They can store information on any device. I was simply being thorough and enforcing academic integrity. Amelia's voice came through the phone speaker, sharp and professional. Mr. Thompson, were you aware of Lily Martinez's 504 plan before October 18th? There was a pause. He started, I may have received some paperwork. That is a yes or no question, Mr. Thompson. Yes, he said finally, I received the plan. And were you aware that the plan specifically addressed her need to have her insulin pump accessible at all times, including during tests? Another pause. I do not recall the specific details. Amelia continued, Mr. Thompson, did you receive an email from Mrs. Martinez on October 10th, reminding you about Lily's medical equipment? He shifted in his seat. Yes. And what was your response to that email? I acknowledged receipt. Did you take any steps to ensure you understood Lily's medical needs or to modify your classroom policies to accommodate her legally protected medical condition? Mr. Thompson's face reddened. My classroom policies apply to all students equally. I do not believe in giving special treatment. This is not special treatment, Amelia said, her voice hard now. This is federally mandated medical accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. What you did was not only dangerous, it was illegal. The meeting went on for another hour, getting more heated and more contentious. Mrs. Kennedy kept trying to mediate, to find some middle ground, but there was no middle ground here. Mr. Thompson had violated my daughter's civil rights, endangered her health, and sent her to the emergency room. And he still did not seem to think he had done anything wrong. I left the meeting knowing that the school was not going to handle this appropriately. Mrs. Kennedy promised to provide Mr. Thompson with additional training and to review his classroom policies, but she stopped short of any real disciplinary action. She kept coming back to the idea that no permanent harm had been done, that we should move forward constructively. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about Lily in that hospital bed, about how much worse it could have been, about what might happen to the next kid with a medical condition who ended up in Mr. Thompson's class. Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and went to my computer. I filed a formal complaint with the State Education Board. I wrote out everything that had happened, attached Dr. Shaw's medical reports and the ER records, included copies of the 504 plan and my email to Mr. Thompson. Amelia had helped me draft it, making sure we covered every legal angle. The response from the Education Board was surprisingly swift. They took the complaint seriously and opened an official investigation. Part of that investigation involved reviewing the school's security footage. And that was when we found the smoking gun. 2 weeks after the incident, I got a call from Daniel Patterson, the investigator assigned to our case. He asked if Miguel and I could come to his office downtown, and something in his voice told me he had found something significant. We sat across from Mr. Patterson in a small conference room, and he pulled up video footage on his laptop. It was from the hallway camera outside Mr. Thompson's classroom, timestamped October 18th, the day of the incident. "I want you to watch this," Mr. Patterson said quietly. The video showed Nurse Coleman approaching Mr. Thompson's classroom at 11:25, just a few minutes after Lily had called me. We watched as Patricia knocked on the door, as Mr. Thompson came out into the hallway to talk to her. We could not hear what they were saying, but we could see Patricia's body language, urgent and upset, gesturing emphatically. We could see Mr. Thompson shaking his head, arms crossed, completely unmoved. Then Patricia left, and Mr. Thompson went back into his classroom. But here's what shocked me. Here's what changed everything. Mr. Patterson fast-forwarded to 11:50 when I had arrived and confronted Mr. Thompson. We watched the whole interaction, saw me walking in, saw Nurse Coleman following, saw the tense conversation. And then we saw Mr. Thompson go to his desk and retrieve the pump. But Mr. Patterson paused the video and pointed at the screen. Look at which drawer he opens. It was the bottom drawer on the left side of his desk, secured with a visible lock. "Now watch this," Mr. Patterson said, and he rewound the footage to 10:35, right when the test had started. We watched students filing into Mr. Thompson's classroom. The angle was not perfect, but we could see through the doorway. At 10:52, we saw Lily's pump beep. We could tell from the way she looked down at it. And then we saw Mr. Thompson walk over to her desk, saw him take the pump, saw him walk back to his desk, and here is the crucial part, saw him deliberately unlock the bottom drawer and place the pump inside. Then he locked it again. "Do you understand what this means?" Mr. Patterson asked. Miguel and I looked at each other, and I felt my stomach drop. "It means he planned it," I said slowly. "It was not a spontaneous decision to take the pump and set it aside. He specifically locked it away in a secure drawer, knowing that no one could retrieve it without his permission. Knowing that even the nurse could not get it back." Mr. Patterson nodded grimly. "It also means that when Nurse Coleman came to his classroom requesting the pump for medical reasons, and when you arrived shortly after that, he had multiple opportunities to return it quickly but chose not to. He kept it locked away for approximately 45 minutes after being informed of the medical emergency. This was not an error in judgment, Mrs. Martinez. This was a deliberate act of control, a conscious decision to prioritize his authority over a child's health and safety." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "Why would he do that?" I whispered. "Why would anyone do that to a child?" Mr. Patterson closed his laptop. "That is what we are trying to understand. But based on this footage and the evidence you have provided, the Education Board is recommending immediate suspension pending a full disciplinary hearing." The disciplinary hearing took place 3 weeks later. It was a formal proceeding with the school board, district administrators, union representatives, and lawyers present. Miguel and I testified, Nurse Coleman testified, Dr. Shaw provided expert medical testimony, and the security footage was presented as evidence. Mr. Thompson maintained his position throughout, insisting he had been following proper classroom procedures, that he had been concerned about academic integrity, that he had not understood the severity of the situation. But his defense fell apart when the video evidence showed him deliberately locking the pump away and then refusing to return it even when explicitly told it was a medical emergency. The school board voted to suspend Mr. Thompson for the remainder of the school year without pay. He would be required to undergo extensive training on disability accommodations and medical conditions before being eligible to return to teaching. Additionally, the district agreed to implement mandatory medical accommodation training for all staff to be completed annually. It felt like a victory, but it also felt insufficient. Mr. Thompson would be back eventually, and what about all the other schools, all the other teachers who might not understand the seriousness of medical conditions like diabetes? That is when I decided to go public with the story. I wrote a detailed account of everything that had happened and posted it on my Facebook page, then shared it to several parent advocacy groups and diabetes support communities. I included the facts of the case but was careful not to violate any privacy laws or legal restrictions. I focused on the systemic issues, the need for better training, the dangers of prioritizing rules over student safety. The response was overwhelming. Within 24 hours, my post had been shared thousands of times. News outlets started reaching out, asking for interviews. Parents from across the country messaged me with their own horror stories about schools mishandling medical accommodations. Diabetes advocacy organizations contacted me offering support and asking how they could help prevent similar incidents. The story went viral in a way I never expected. Major news networks covered it, parenting blogs wrote about it, education policy experts weighed in. The pressure on Roosevelt Middle School and the district became intense. Within 2 weeks, the district superintendent, Christopher Bennett, announced a comprehensive policy reform. Every school in the district would implement new protocols for handling students with medical conditions. Teachers would receive mandatory training not just once, but at the start of every school year. Schools would assign medical accommodation coordinators to ensure compliance with 504 plans. And there would be a streamlined reporting system for parents to flag potential issues before they became emergencies. Other school districts started adopting similar policies. State legislators began discussing bills to strengthen protections for students with medical conditions. National diabetes organizations used our story as a rallying cry for better education and awareness. My phone rang constantly for weeks. I did interviews, participated in panel discussions, spoke at school board meetings in other districts. It was exhausting but also cathartic, turning our trauma into something meaningful, something that might protect other kids. Lily handled the attention better than I expected. At first she was embarrassed that her story was so public, but when she started receiving messages from other diabetic kids thanking her, telling her she had helped them feel safer at school, she began to see the value in what we were doing. Mr. Thompson, I learned through the grapevine, never returned to teaching. He resigned at the end of his suspension period rather than face the additional scrutiny and requirements the district was now imposing. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction at that, but mostly I just felt relief that he would not be in a position to hurt another child. The lawsuit we filed against the school district was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount that covered all of Lily's medical expenses plus damages. But more important than the money was the agreement the district made to continue the new training programs and policies indefinitely, to make them a permanent part of the school system's culture. It has been a year now since that October day when Mr. Thompson locked away Lily's insulin pump. Lily is in high school now, thriving despite everything that happened. She has become an advocate herself, speaking at her new school's freshman orientation about diabetes awareness and the importance of medical accommodations. She is still in the environmental club, she got a part in the fall musical, and her diabetes management is excellent. Sometimes she still has nightmares about that day, about feeling sick and scared in Mr. Thompson's classroom, about not being able to access the medical equipment that keeps her alive. We have been doing family therapy to help her process the trauma, and it is helping. She is resilient, my girl, stronger than I ever imagined. As for me, I learned some hard lessons through all of this. I learned that you cannot always trust the systems that are supposed to protect your children, that vigilance is not optional when it comes to your child's health and safety, that speaking up and fighting back is sometimes the only option. I learned that one person's ignorance or stubbornness can have devastating consequences, but that one person's determination to fight for justice can create ripples of change that reach farther than you ever dreamed. I still get messages from parents dealing with similar situations, asking for advice or just looking for someone who understands. I try to help when I can, sharing resources, connecting people with lawyers or advocacy groups, reminding them that they have rights and their children have rights. The school system is not perfect, even now with the new policies in place. There are still gaps, still failures, still moments when kids fall through the cracks. But it is better than it was, and that matters. The training programs we pushed for have reached thousands of teachers. The awareness we raised has probably saved lives, though we will never know exactly how many or whose. Roosevelt Middle School dedicated a new medical accommodation center last spring, A proper space for the school nurse with updated equipment and private rooms for students who need to manage their health conditions during the school day. They invited Lily and me to the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and standing there watching Nurse Coleman show off the new facility, I felt something I had not felt in a long time when thinking about that school. Hope. Not naive hope, not the blind trust one had at the beginning, but informed, vigilant hope. Hope that comes from knowing you fought and won, that you made a difference, that you turned something terrible into something that might spare other families the same pain. Lily keeps her pump visible now, clipped to her waistband where everyone can see it. She does not hide it or apologize for it. It is part of who she is, and she refuses to let anyone make her feel ashamed or afraid of the medical equipment that keeps her alive. And I keep telling our story, because silence helps no one. Because somewhere out there right now, there is probably another teacher who does not understand the seriousness of medical conditions, another administrator who is more worried about liability than student safety, another parent who trusts the system and does not realize they need to be their child's advocate. I tell our story so those parents know they are not alone, so they know what to watch for, so they know that fighting back is possible and necessary and worth it. I tell our story because Mr. Edward Thompson thought he could prioritize his classroom rules over my daughter's life, and he needed to learn that he was wrong. Because Principal Kennedy thought she could sweep a medical emergency under the rug to avoid controversy, and she needed to learn that parents will not always stay quiet. I tell our story because it is not really just our story anymore. It belongs to every diabetic kid who deserves to feel safe at school, to every parent who has ever had to fight an institution that should have been protecting their child, to every educator who takes medical accommodations seriously and works to create truly inclusive classrooms. The insulin pump that Mr. Thompson locked away that October day is still working, still beeping occasionally, still keeping Lily alive. But now when it beeps in a classroom, teachers know what it means. They know it is not a distraction or an excuse or something to be controlled and confiscated. They know it is the sound of a child being kept safe, and they leave it alone. That is all I ever wanted. That is what I fought for. And now, finally, we have it.